think we're all on. We've got one joining, so she just came on. So we're all here. Welcome. We're glad you are with us. I am Susan Grace Close, Associate Director of Connectional Ministries for Discipleship for the conference. And we have been offering these webinars for folks to begin to think about the different holy seasons in the fall. And today we're focusing on Advent to Epiphany. And we are delighted that Dawn Chester is with us today to lead us. She is at St. Paul United Methodist Church, but also has a wealth of experience after having served earlier at Discipleship Ministries in Nashville in worship. And so she has lived and breathed worship ministries for many, many years. So we are delighted that she is here to share ideas and thoughts and to help us think about it. You might want to mute yourself, but I know she is planning to use a conversation, so be sure you unmute yourself when you want to say something. Down at the bottom is a reaction, and you can raise your hand if you are not, if we're not calling on you when you want to speak. This session is being recorded, and I will get a copy of Dawn's PowerPoint and give us about 24, 48 hours, and we will upload this on the conference website. Since this is the last in the series, I will also be sending out the link to the web page once we get everything uploaded so that you can see the entire series if you missed one of the other ones. We've got several still coming on, so we're going to have a good group here, and I'll keep admitting. But let us open with a word of prayer. A holy and loving God, we come into your presence today knowing that you surround us with your love and care. As we think about this holy season coming up in the strange and unusual time, we ask that you instill within us wisdom and ideas, creativity. We're grateful for Dawn and she facilitates this conversation and brings her thoughts and ideas to us. We just ask that you bless this time together. In your holy name we pray. Amen. Dawn, it's all yours.
Okay, I'm going to do my best here. So, welcome everyone. I know some of you that are on here. My name is Dawn Chester, and I am currently over at St. Paul in Fountain City, as Susan shared. I did spend 5 years working as the Director of Preaching Ministries at Discipleship Ministries in Nashville, and have a PhD in liturgical studies. So I've done a lot of thinking about this, but as I said earlier, I don't really have, I'm trying to figure all this out just like you are. So I'm going to try to just walk us through the questions, and hopefully maybe together we can generate some answers, or at least be encouraging of one another's creativity and be permission giving about this extraordinary time in which we are living and trying to plan for high holy seasons. Yesterday I preached a sermon about how part of my sermon was talking about how yesterday Yom Kippur began at 5 o'clock at sundown and continues until sundown today. And as I was exploring what was happening in our community in Knoxville, I realized that Temple Bethel in Knoxville was all online on Zoom for Yom Kippur this year, which I just can't even imagine how difficult that must be for other faith communities who, when they reach high holy seasons, are having to adapt and reinterpret their traditions that are annual. So I know you've already been through Easter, Lent, and this because the pandemic started and everybody kind of got through Easter, Lent and Easter and Holy Week, but that was at the beginning and everyone was scrambling. So now we've got a little bit further out to think through some of the issues that we're all facing as we try to think about Advent, the season of Advent to Epiphany, including Christmas. So I want you all first to tell me who you are very quickly. I don't want to spend a bunch of time on this, but tell me your name and your role. I assume everyone here is a pastor, but I just want to ask what church you serve, what is the size of your worshiping community, and the basic primary worship style, or if you have two worship styles, let me know that too. So who have we got? Susan, can you call on people? Okay, Melissa, you go first.
Yeah, I'm Melissa Smith, rocking the celebratory orange and white today. Good luck charm. I serve as the pastor of Kodak Methodist up in Sevierville, the home of Dollywood and the Great Smoky Mountains. Worshiping style it's not a great question right now because pre-pandemic, we were worshiping both traditional and contemporary. Post-pandemic, we're in the middle of the pandemic, we are doing a blended worship. So trying to incorporate both styles. And so pre-pandemic, we were somewhere between 150 and 175. In the middle of the pandemic, in person, we're around 90 to 100. And then live streaming online with people watching that as well.
Thank you. Next, somebody just has to jump in.
All right, so I'll jump in. I'm Susan Arnold. I pastor at Blumpville United Methodist Church. Size of worshiping community pre-COVID was an average of 125 in person for a traditional worship service. Size of worshiping community post-COVID, gosh, it varies. When we reopened first, we averaged 45 people in person with a hybrid online community also. Second relaunch, we're sitting at about 30 with a hybrid online community also. And then so worship style is traditional with a mix of hymn, contemporary music. They're flexible in that. So we don't have to just land on traditional hymns. So they're flexible. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm Cindy Paxton. I'm the pastor at Panther Springs in Morristown. Pre-pandemic, we were worshiping about 60-ish, mostly traditional. Again, kind of like what Susan said, we have some contemporary kind of thrown in there, but primarily traditional. As of right now, we're only worshiping about 20 to 25. And again, basically the same. We are doing online as well, YouTube and Facebook Live.
So you're 20 to 25 in person now?
In person now.
Okay. Okay.
Hey, I'm Dave Graybill. I'm one of the pastors at Keith Methodist Church in Athens, Tennessee. And we pre-pandemic had about 300 folks worshiping across 3 different services, one contemporary and 2 traditional. Now we're back in person. We've had probably 65 to 75 the last few Sundays, plus doing all the online stuff. And so
Are you in person inside?
We went inside. Yesterday was our second Sunday inside. We had done some outdoors and it still was running about 60, 65 there. We got up to 75 last week. So.
And one service inside?
That's right. One service inside, and it's combining the different musicians and so on. So yeah, we're not quite sure what it'll look like longer term, whether we'll go back to 3 or whether we'll move to 2. We're just not sure.
Okay, great, thanks.
Hi, I'm Tammy Bales. I'm a chaplain at a retirement community in Asheville. Pre-COVID, we have a beautiful chapel. So pre-COVID, we had probably 75-ish, 80 residents in service. Had another service in the morning, usually around 30 to 40. And we have been under strict precautions and more so than probably anybody about doing anything. And so everything that we've been doing has switched over. And of course, we're going out. Actually, we have our own channel that we show to our residents and they can tune in. So everything is virtual right now. And that's kind of where we are, but trying to make things more visually stimulating, especially for older adults, and the services more engaging, which has been challenging, so you're getting a different view every Sunday.
Right. Okay, who have I not heard from?
Hey, I'm Sam Ward. I'm at St. Mark in Knoxville, Tennessee. Pre-COVID, we probably had, I'd say around 130 between two services. We've kind of ramped up our online stuff a lot during COVID, but so that keeps going. But we're back inside now. Yesterday, first day, with about 60 or so. Outdoor services before that would see between 55 and 65. So that's kind of where we are at the moment.
Okay, and you're keeping your online service going? Is everyone keeping your online service going? Yes. Yes. Okay. Who else have we got? Melissa?
Yes. I'm Melissa Malcolm, and I'm serving Pine Grove. I used to be at Cedar Grove. It's really confusing. Pine Grove. That's the first. I haven't done it in worship yet, though, so I'm good. I'm serving Pine Grove and Hartman's Chapel in Greene County, two rural churches. Pre-COVID, I wasn't there, so that's one of my fun challenges. But they were worshiping 65 each. Post-COVID, we have been worshiping outside. One church is going inside next week. We've been worshiping outside, and we've been averaging 45 at one and 35 at another. But I expect when we go inside, I'm going to lose half my congregation from the numbers that I'm anticipating of people who've talked to me but won't speak up to say don't go inside. We have FM transmitters for both of our outdoor worships, so I've got a lot that have been staying in their cars, and I'm going to lose them when we go inside. So I'm actually anticipating that we're going to be back online because the age of my group, if we're ended up with less than 20 in person, I don't know that that's the right thing to do. So I'm just looking for all kinds of ways. Currently, they're both traditional services. Currently, I use sermon by phone, and I record my sermon only ahead of time because I don't have internet at either church. So it's double challenging, but I'm just looking for ways to figure it out.
Okay, great.
And one caveat, the reason I look like this, my church conference paperwork is due today. So everybody just give me a bit of grace today, okay?
Who else? Has anyone not spoken up? I don't even know how many people are here. So.
Hey, Dawn. This is Michael Vaughn. I serve a 2-point charge in Telford, Tennessee, which is just outside of Jonesboro. So Telford averages pre-COVID about 70 in a blended style with kind of a heavy focus on video and visual and performing arts. Asbury is a traditional congregation averaging about 15 pre-COVID. Since we have been outside for the last month, we've had about 45 in person in a combined outdoor worship service, and about that many as well online. And then we're looking at going back inside this coming Sunday.
Wow. And I think we have one more person.
I am Carolyn Kidd. I'm the odd person. I am a certified lay minister. Just completed an assignment with Cedar Hill in Wytheville, and am now worshiping and working with Ray Amos Jr. at South Bristol. At South Bristol, there is an outdoor, an indoor, and a Facebook Live service. I don't know what their numbers were prior to all of this, but they're averaging about 60 to 65 in the two services, and then the Facebook Live, I'm not sure where we are there.
All right. Has anybody else not introduced themselves? Okay, thank you. So we have lots of, I think we've got lots of common things going on. One of the things that has happened in a lot of places is if churches have more than one style of worship, a lot of people with their online stuff had already moved to more of a blended type thing. And that raises all kinds of questions for not only how to do the Advent Christmas season, but how to plan going forward with smaller congregations and with the need to clean, if those protocols hold between services. It looks like it'll be a while before we get back to any kind of normal. So what I did was try to just make a list as a starting point of what we would normally be doing as we get ready for the Advent season and the traditions that are pretty common across a lot of churches. And this is just my list. If you have other things that you want to add to this list that are common around here, let me know. I'm going to have that in the next slide. But all of these things, as we start thinking about Advent, start to raise questions for me. I don't know about you. For example, the hanging of the greens and the decorating of the church. One of the main questions that I've been thinking about is, how do we do that safely? The hanging of the greens and the decorating of the church usually involves, pretty close together work with a lot of people. Do we want to decorate the church at the same level we would if there's a pretty good likelihood a lot of our worship over this season will not be inside the building? And most of us are having to handle more than one worship service a week if we're doing something in person and online, unless you're just live streaming, you're in person. We all have a double responsibility now to get two different worship services together at least. And so all of those things affect our time and our energy to be able to do all the things that we would normally do. The next thing on my list is the lighting of the Advent wreath, which is a big tradition in a lot of churches, but is not a very historically rooted tradition. Actually, that tradition came from a home worship tradition originally in Germany. And that's one of those things I think we could talk about easily moving that back into people's homes. Has anybody considered that? Moving and encouraging our church members to do a family style devotional using an Advent wreath rather than making it part of a worship service on Sunday morning. Anybody thought about that? Did you all know that the Advent wreath was a fairly new tradition? It's only been around since about the 40s. Even though we've never seen worship without it, it's not something that goes back to the early church, and it's particularly suited for a family devotional time. The buying of poinsettias, do we have the money to spend on that? Do we want to decorate the church in the way that we normally would? Here at St. Paul, they have a tradition not only of marking the weeks with candles around the Advent wreath, but by adding a banner on each side as you progress through the season of Advent. Do we need to do that? Do we want to do that if we have such a tradition? We can change the stoles and pyramids. That's pretty easy. What does music look like during the Advent season? If you are following the lectionary, you may have one kind of set of how you're going to roll thematically through the season with going through the deep eschatological piece where the end times are coming over the first few weeks before, you go through that deep repentance thing. But a lot of people use series and don't actually go through that process. So I hope that you know at this point where you're going in your preaching during Advent or how you're going to, because you need to nail that down first. I'm thinking nobody will be able to have a Christmas cantata unless somebody does it through a virtual choir, but I can't imagine anybody having the time to produce something like that. Likewise, movement around the sanctuary with children, doing a children's Christmas pageant seems out. Building a nativity scene seems out. The annual Advent Craft Festival, if you have something like that, seems like not something we can necessarily do. We certainly can't eat together. A lot of places have like here at St. Paul, they have a children's Christmas pageant combined with a dinner every year, and can't do that. And then the other thing I put on my Advent traditions list was the longest night service, which has become a pretty common service for people to do on the shortest day of the year, to recognize those who are grieving and struggling through the season of preparing for Christmas, which is such a joyous time in the media, but for a lot of people, it's a really, really hard time. We may need to concentrate more on that piece this year, because I suspect it's going to be a really, really hard time for people. So acknowledging that. Do you all have other things that you would add to my list? No? Have I covered everything that you've done in Advent?
Are we mentioning Christmas Eve yet?
No, we're not to Christmas
Okay.
Eve.
Just Advent.
Just Advent. Okay, so here are the challenges that I started thinking about. And please unmute yourself at this point, because I really do want us to converse as we talk through these challenges. So as I was thinking about the online component, which I think what we all have to plan to do is, as Susan put it to me, we've got to be able to pivot on a dime. If we get shut down, we have to be able to pivot to going back online. We also need to keep our online stuff going no matter what, whether or not we can worship in person. So I want to start there, because I think if we concentrate online, like for me, I can do all the online stuff and then just execute that live in person. Is that how you all are doing things right now? Starting with the online, executing it in person?
Basically, that's what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Which is why you've moved to more of a blend. Another reason to move to a blend is because you can't really have choirs no matter what you do. So it's hard to do those kinds of pieces of music with fewer voices, right? Probably the one in this group most faced with that difficulty is Dave. Dave, what's happening with your choir? Do you have a traditional choir?
They're not meeting, and we're already anticipating. Nobody's actually said, I guess we can't do the cantata this year, but we're pretty much resigned to that. So mostly what we're doing is we've had some duos, and I think a trio safely spaced out, but for now, that's kind of what we've been doing.
Okay, so try to imagine what that would be like in your gigantic sanctuary with 60, how many people? 60 to...
So we actually haven't been back in the sanctuary yet. We've just been in the gathering contemporary space because we can space out the chairs.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm trying to do that.
I think for most people, Christmas season's really, really attached to traditional, right? It's attached to traditional hymnody, traditional Christmas music, choirs. Melissa, tell me what you would be doing through the Christmas season. Melissa Smith, in a contemporary worship service?
A lot of the same hymns that we would have done in a traditional service, incorporating more video elements with that. But with doing a blended, it's so odd that people have really enjoyed the blended so much that they don't want to go back to separate services. So I'm not so sure what is going to happen with that yet.
I think we're seeing a lot of that. I've been doing a consultation with a very large church in Tampa called Hyde Park United Methodist Church, and they had a contemporary service and a traditional. Well, they actually had, I don't know, 6 services on Sunday morning or something ridiculous like that. But they were all separate. And now that they've started doing everything blended online, not only have they merged together as congregations who were formerly separate and gotten to know more people across their worshiping communities, but they all have learned that they enjoy this type of music. And it's much easier, I think, to do contemporary music ensembles safely than it is choirs. So it's a very complex problem. With their choirs, Dave, one of the things they've tried to do is, as they anticipate coming back to in-person worship, which you might be anticipating for the Christmas season, is to take a small ensemble spread out and put them up front and then augment with pre-recorded music, either from the congregation or through videos. So that, because if you put a really small ensemble up on Christmas Eve, for example, at the front of a very large sanctuary, visually it's going to be a really big letdown. So you've got to make up for that sound somehow. So I've been thinking about, so the Advent season is really about marking off those weeks. And so I've been thinking about, okay, if we're starting with online, what are we going to do to mark off those weeks and that progression? And we don't have to tie ourselves to those words that are given to us by our bulletin covers of, what are they? Peace, hope, love, something. I don't know. Those were actually invented by a company that made worship supplies. Church worship supplies, and they have nothing to do, that's why they don't go with our texts from the lectionary or anything else. You kind of make them work. So I want to just encourage you, as you mark time, to not be stuck with any of those traditions that maybe have driven your worship in your past. Maybe think about marking that progression in a different way that's more tied to whatever your series or direction is as you move closer and closer and closer to Christmas Eve. And so if a lot of people, and it sounds like at least 50% of your people you're anticipating will not be in person for these weeks or for Christmas Eve, what can you do to help people to embody and feel that sense of spirituality that we get through this high holy season at home? I think that's where we have to get to the key. How can some of these things be reworked so that, or reinterpreted so that people can do them at home and do something physical? Because that's the problem with online worship, right? It's all in the head. It's all in the eyes. And that isn't what we do when we gather for worship. When we gather for worship, it's all in the body. It's in what we physically do together. We sing, we speak, we move around, we hug. So to put it all in the head is really been difficult for everyone I know. I put some things down. A lot of churches do have, how many of you all, show me with your hands, how many of you all typically would have communion on Christmas Eve? Yeah, so that's a very, very common thing that we have to figure out this year if we are, whether we're online or in person. I put in here that come and go communion is specifically prohibited by this holy mystery, which is our official teaching on the sacrament of Holy Communion for the denomination, and that online communion is still prohibited by the ruling of the Council of Bishops. However, that said, I can't think of a better thing to do on Christmas Eve than come and go communion or online communion, right? So I think extraordinary times maybe call for extraordinary responses.
Don, I may be incorrect on this, but I believe that the Council of Bishops has allowed online communion during this pandemic. I think each bishop has made their own decision on that.
Right. They each made their own decision. They have not made a decision as a council. And so technically, they are not authorized to do that individually. I'm just saying that because that's the way it is.
I understand.
I'm not saying that, and I wrote my dissertation on this, and I've had online communion myself. So I actually wrote in my dissertation in a footnote that if we had a global pandemic, we might need to rethink this. So I'm not telling you not to do this. In fact, I might even be telling you, I think we need to find a way to share the sacrament on Christmas Eve, even if it's not within the parameters of a document that is not written to speak to this moment. It didn't anticipate it. I also thought about, so I know a lot of people have been doing drive-through communion. So I was thinking about, could you do something that involves picking up elements and then taking them home? Could you do something to help people have an Advent wreath in their home and send them a liturgy? Or could you read the liturgy and have them light the candle at home as part of their at-home devotion? So the in-person challenges I have, listed are, should we decorate? Has anybody considered that question? Are you wondering, can you scale back?
We're thinking about maybe scaling back.
Mm-hmm. How does, what do you think about the Advent time is most important for preparing for Christmas?
In terms of decorations or?
Decorations, rituals. I guess I'm trying to ask, how can we get people in that spirit? I mean, Advent historically is about, it's like a mini Lent. It's about repenting of our sins in preparation for the birth of Christ, which is an incarnational event. It's very difficult.
And I'm playing and toying with the idea of an invitation of more contemplative Advent states and time together, more contemplative, maybe worship service, more, I don't know, just to really give people that opportunity to slow down and to make space, that they're just not waiting and tearing off a strip that, oh, Advent's, you know what I mean, we're going through, but really a more guided opportunity to kind of culminate on that, which, like you said, with Lent, kind of that thought in mind.
That sounds really wise. I mean, I can't imagine that the whole secular season of lead up to Christmas Day is going to be the same this year. We're not going to see people shopping, right? Or going out into spaces where they would hear Christmas music playing as much. A lot of people are going to be doing this interior thing. In some ways, that seems like a great opportunity for the church to kind of reclaim this season and its historical purpose, rather than continue to grab on to what it has become in the more secular world.
Susan, do you have resources that you're using in order to use the more contemplative style with your congregation?
I am working on putting those together. I have a few. They're on my shelf. I'd be glad to share those. I can send those out.
Those would be great.
Yeah. During Lent, I was part of a group that made a bunch of at-home devotional materials for people to use, especially during Holy Week. Those would be good things to grab a hold of too. I'm sure there will be some things made and presented by Ministry Matters, is the group that particular consortium is working with. But I love that idea of doing something more contemplative and walking people through that period of repentance, which is not what people expect.
Mm-hmm.
But yes.
I was just going to say, you asked if we were going to decorate. One of my churches will be inside and has planned to decorate, unless they're closed down. My other church is not meeting in the sanctuary. They're going to meet in the fellowship hall when they come inside. Mm-hmm. But I've been discussing with my worship team of going on and decorating. If no other reason, I can video my sermons in front of pieces, mm-hmm. So that those who have internet access can see those familiar pieces for them. Because I don't know that any of us will actually be in the sanctuary, but just that commitment to going on and decorating and being able to take pictures of it, maybe send them pictures of it, is the one thing I've been thinking about, because I am concerned that we won't be able to be in the sanctuary.
Right. I had thought maybe we could put the Christmas tree up and then give Christmas to somebody from the church and have them each week talk about one of them as part of the worship service, their meaning.
Yeah.
What about this marking of the weeks?
That would totally fit into more of the contemplative stuff too, as well, Dawn. Bringing back what you're saying, the true meaning of the season, and allowing people to see even the symbols that we take for granted are holy symbols during this time.
Yeah.
I also think this is a great time to explain why we have this symbolism, right? Because we get so focused on the outward, the decoration, the visual, and we forget that they all had meaning, at least initially, and sometimes we lose track of that meaning. So, it's a way to really spread out your hanging of the green service throughout the entire Advent season as we explain the elements of what we've put out every year.
Yes, and maybe do something each week to mark that involves some movement, march towards Christmas Eve during the season. I think whether we're online or in person, we need to really focus in on those Advent 1, 2, 3, 4, and the main theme according with each one, and mark each week somehow. We would normally in the sanctuary mark that with a candle, right? An additional candle. But how can we, maybe it's as simple as putting a visual of 1 candle, 2 candles, 3 candles, 4 candles, as you go across the 4 seasons online, the 4 weeks online. All right, let's keep plugging forward here and talk about the Christmas season. So I made another list here, which includes Christmas Eve services, a Christmas Day service, if you have that. So most people don't, unless Christmas falls on a Sunday, which I don't think it does this year. The question of Holy Communion and how we can capture that online and in some reinterpreted way that gets at that feeling for people, helps them enter into that spiritual space, even if we're not physically able to gather and be close like we normally would. If your church has a family service, how are you going to attend to the particular needs of children during the Christmas Eve service? The Hallelujah chorus I put in because that's such a big ending for a lot of places. Silent
how we're gonna. Sorry, I have to insert a pun here. I do wonder how we're gonna handle that this year.
The Hallelujah chorus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're gonna handle that. Sorry.
Handle, haha.
I don't know. Yeah. Silent Night with candlelight. That's a big one for me. Because I think of all, I mean, even though I know that it's a fairly new tradition, I think of all the things that we do, that's the moment for most people when we are standing there with a candle singing Silent Night and they turn down. I mean, doesn't everybody do that pretty much? Yes. So how can we do that if we're not physically gathered? How can we get to that? I thought a lot about luminaries, because if it's not too cold on Christmas Eve, we could potentially be outside and do something around candlelight and listen maybe to Silent Night rather than singing. I don't know if anybody in this conference does Las Posadas. I don't think that can really happen. Because that involves going to people's homes. It's pretty common for people to have a Sunday after the Sunday following Christmas Eve service is pretty informal and in pajamas. Will you have a watch night service? Will you have a Wesley? I mean, there's lots of things that go on between Christmas Eve and Epiphany. So I tried to
every
put
service
all
been
of
in
that.
pajamas for 7 months?
What?
Hasn't every service been in pajamas for like 7 months?
Okay, so maybe that's a point of reinterpretation.
Good
Right
point,
there
Sam.
is to say, okay, we are going to get dressed up on Christmas Eve, physically dressed up. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm not putting on my Sunday clothes very often. Even when I record a sermon, I put my robe over a t-shirt and jeans. Right? So that whole dressing up component has been lost, and that's part of the physicality of Christmas time is clothes.
Yeah, I haven't preached this much in sandals since I worked in youth ministry.
I know. I'm always just like, please don't catch my shoes. Film. So what else? What else is part of your Christmas Eve tradition where you are?
Well, you had mentioned it before, but building a nativity, one of our traditions is having a live nativity where in shifts people, put on the robes and the crowns and all that. And and we have live animals from a local farmer that comes in. So
are you going to do that?
Well, I'm trying to figure out, normally they're able to kind of maintain some space from one another. The tricky thing is putting on the same, clothes, shifting out the clothes. I don't know.
I wondered about that because I think that if it's not too cold, doing something outdoors on Christmas Eve could really meet a lot of needs for people.
Maybe we just tell them to bring their own clothes with whatever they're
or maybe you do, why do they need to be wearing certain clothes?
It's tradition.
Huh?
It's tradition.
Right, but can you reinterpret that in a way that's safe and contemporary?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I wish I had more answers than questions, but so what I was thinking about in terms of adapting for Christmas Eve was, how do we embody incarnation when we're disembodied in worship a lot of the time, and we have been for the last 6 months.
On one other aspect, and this has always been something very meaningful at everywhere I've served, is the mission aspect of Advent, where we have either the angel trees or the blessing trees, or the ways that we impact the people in our community, and how we're going to do that this year. Where usually it's a lot of collections, but you still are having to work with the agencies and making sure that things are sanitized and are able to be collected and received.
I wonder if maybe you pivot to gift cards. No response.
I will just say this, just my concern with gift cards is the same concern that we have even sometimes with the buying of the gifts, is that they may or may not get used for the way that we intend them. There's been a number of reports, especially of parents who get toys for their kids and then try to return those toys for money so they can buy other things. And it's like, I don't want to discredit the offering in that. I get really concerned when we start talking gift cards.
Do others share that concern?
We do. We usually partner with one of our local schools for gifts, and they specifically ask us not to do gift cards for that very reason.
Well, I think you bring up a really good point. Can you think of a way that people could take an angel from your angel tree online? Or could you put your angel tree out front or outside and schedule a time for people to come and grab one? I think in terms of sanitizing those items, as long as they're collected and sit for a few days before they get distributed, they probably would be safe. They're saying now that you don't really need to bleach spray everything the way that we thought. But I did want to say that I think that if you're online, keeping it really simple and focusing on the message and music on Christmas Eve is probably the easiest thing to do. Keep it simple. But the question then becomes, how do you help people to really feel the spirit in their bodies on Christmas Eve if they're not physically there? And I feel like even if you're online if we can figure out a way to just get people moving to some location as part of their Christmas Eve thing, probably outside, that would, maybe get at that. And then I had the question of, for those of you who are in really larger churches, if you have more than one service on Christmas Eve, how are you going to clean between? And what would Christmas Eve look like gathered with no singing, with no food sharing?
The singing has been a real issue with my folks, even just in regular worship. We're really struggling, and they are really struggling.
Is that true with everybody who's regathered for in-person worship?
Yes.
What are people doing?
Well, we have a smaller groups of things singing, but just like the congregational singing, and not even so much having the full choir, but it's the congregational singing that is really bothering them a lot.
We just kind of invite them to move their mouths, mouth the words behind the mask. Nobody's really policing whether or not there's actually sound coming out, but we want them to feel engaged in worship.
Right. That's the part that's the most difficult, is the liturgy and them feeling engaged, because they're not. And I've not told them. We've said, you can still hum, you can still make a joyful noise in your heart, and all of those kinds of things. But they are really, really struggling with that. And that's a large part of the reason that many of mine have not come back to in-person worship.
Mm-hmm.
I've had that comment as well, that people want to stay at home and be online because they can sing as loud as they want to in their house.
Right.
I have that in our cars. I don't have a lot of people who have internet access, where Greene County doesn't have a lot of internet access, but they're enjoying singing in their car, where I'm being able to play it over my Bluetooth, over my phone. And it's actually been able to get away with playing some more contemporary stuff for them, because it's coming over a phone and they don't recognize that it's not just piano music. But we've been sticking some stuff in. But, I think they're really going to, I really think their number one problem when they come inside for both of these churches over the next month is going to be that it's not normal that they can't sing and they can't do all the things they want to do, and they're going to be very unhappy about it, is what
Right.
I'm seeing.
The big problem with regathering in person, particularly indoors, is not only are people silent, but they're physically moved, right? So, I mean, I got my little Advent thing here, but this being silenced and masked when we're together is visually disturbing. It's like The Handmaid's Tale, right? It doesn't feel good to people to be silenced and masked. So can we encourage people or get people a candle to hold in front of their face and sing Silent Night from home? That seems to me to be a much more satisfying solution than, being together and not being able to sing. I mean, you could, I guess, hold up a candle and listen and look into each other's eyes, maybe make some movement around the sanctuary where you really are, while instead of singing, you really work on connecting with people while you listen through eye contact, since that's all we have left when we're like this. Are you all having that experience of being able to read people's facial expression through their eyes?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Melissa, Malcolm, I know you started during the pandemic, and so did I. So I don't know how many others here who had a move this year, but I was telling Susan, one of the things for me is I've interacted with people tons and tons like this as a head on Zoom, and really gotten to know people this way. And then when I meet them in person and they're like this and their head is attached to a body, I don't recognize them.
I'm not getting to interact with them except with the mask. Because none of my people have Zoom, and the ones who do won't use it. So I literally am only meeting them like this. And so the second they have their mask off, maybe we're further apart, worship is over and we're further apart after Bible study, going to the car, and I'm looking and I'm like, who's that? Oh,
you can't,
yeah. I have no idea who they are. I have no idea. Because you look totally different like this than you do. So I'm really struggling to even know my people is my challenge.
Me too.
Even the ones who are showing up. So
what it feels like to me is if we're like this in person on Christmas Eve, then that eye contact thing is going to be the most important thing we can do to help people connect. And that means if you're going to have communion, for example, you have your little, I don't know what you're doing, but we're using the pop top things because that seems the safest thing to do. The little, coffee creamer version of communion.
People call it the clergy Lunchables.
And I mean, any other time I would say no, but yes, this is the option. But how do you deliver that to a person on Christmas Eve so you can connect with their eyes? Because that's what communion on Christmas Eve is about, right?
We get our first tryout of that this Sunday with World Communion Sunday. This will be the first time that we've done communion since the pandemic began. So I'm very hopeful, but very worried about how it's all going to go.
Yeah.
Churches hated it. We did it last month and they hated it. So I'm going to what Susan Arnold has suggested, which is an oyster cracker and a grape. And the people I've talked to about that are very excited because they couldn't find the wafer. I have too many that can't open it. They hated the taste of the wafer. It tastes nasty. And so they don't like it. They're used to homemade bread, or Hawaiian Jesus bread. So they don't want the wafers. So we're trying the oysters and the grape, just a grape that Susan Arnold suggested this week. And I'm doing it. We're still in cars, so I'm presenting it to them personally in their car window. So I get to look at them. because they were taking it in their car. I wasn't seeing them. It was just so distant, like you said. I haven't had an opportunity to look at my new people in the eye and serve them communion yet. So with the car separation, I'm real excited about that opportunity.
I love that idea of a grape and a cracker. It's always also acceptable in a very long historical tradition to just have a single element of bread. You don't have to have, if you're going to just do one, and the church worshiped that way for many, many years. They didn't share in a common cup for various reasons in history. But for a long period, they denied the laity the cup because they were afraid they were going to spill a drop of Jesus' blood on the carpet. And so the priests only had the wine and the people only got the bread. So my former colleague Taylor Burton Edwards has suggested that you could go ahead and safely cube the Jesus Hawaiian loaf and drop from above into people's folded hands like you normally would while looking them in the eye mask. So they hold out their hands and you just drop the single element and then they don't get the juice. That's another option. But it seems to me that the really important thing about this is that contact and helping people to make contact with each other through their eyes. When you have people gathered in worship, are they looking at each other or are they staring straight ahead? This is the problem with our sanctuaries, which have only straight ahead pews. Can you encourage people to rotate in their pew and look around at people while they're listening to music? That would get them embodied. That would get them connecting with each other. Because that's what Christmas Eve is about, right? It's about connecting with each other and with Christ on this holy night. Any responses to that? Okay. The last thing I have is that this season ends, well, I don't know if you all are planning to do anything like that in between Sunday. Is it just one Sunday this year? I haven't looked at the calendar. I don't even know. Is there just one Sunday between Christmas Eve and Epiphany? It depends on the day of the week. Just one. So
yeah, just the 27th.
So one of the things that I thought about is we have to, after we have to do Epiphany and then we have to give whatever we decorated, we have to bring people back together to get things down. And honestly, what I was worried about with this whole decorating thing is that you may have way fewer people who are willing to come and do this and risk their health to help decorate or undecorate. And I don't want it to fall on all of you. And because we are all stretched thin enough just trying to get the worship service done, we are not, we need to be fair to ourselves in the way that we organize this. So I want to be permission giving to you all today about not taking on too much so that you don't have to be the one to take on its deconstruction at the end.
Dawn, one idea I was thinking about is maybe doing a virtual hanging of the greens where we invite different people to come maybe throughout the week. We record them placing a particular thing, and then we put a whole service together with maybe some music and that kind of thing so that everybody kind of experiences that very traditional, much beloved service in the same way. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe you could do it and then speed it up.
Yeah.
Like double time it. So you have people going up and down and then ta-da, right? Oh, that's a great idea. I love that. That seems like a lot of work though. Who's going to do that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the hard thing, right? We can come up with ideas, but if we don't have manpower to execute, And I have people in my church across the gamut, from those who have not left their homes since March and don't see anyone, to those who are itching to be back in worship inside as soon as possible, and every point in between. And we all have all of that, right?
So to piggyback off of what David shared, I was toying with putting together an at-home, kind of like the Advent, but an at-home hanging of the green service, so people can do that at their homes, and kind of reclaim that in their home, not just in their, because I don't know that I think that's seen as something we do in our sanctuary, but then we go home and put up whatever we put up. So
Right.
just trying to have some transference there of, hey, this is good in your home too. I'm kind
Maybe you could take some of those Chrismons and give them to your people to use on their own trees.
Yeah.
I like that idea. I do want to strongly push us to get people to provide people with an Advent wreath, or encourage them to make one. This could be a children's project that has really simple things. 5 candles, 4 purple or 3 purple and 1 pink and white in the middle. People could use green from their yards to make these things. And then you can either make that part of your weekly service where you or a volunteer reads the liturgy, and people just light by physically participating at home. Or you could provide that written liturgy moment to move that tradition back into people's homes and help people reclaim the spiritual dimensions of the Advent season at home. Because I think we've lost so much of that. And as you said, Susan, people decorate or do whatever they do at home. It may or may not correspond to what we're doing in the church. So it's really a great opportunity to sort of reclaim that for people. And it's that physical thing. Yes.
A good year to, every year I feel like we're always encouraging our folks to find that time to slow down. And this might be a great time to kind of lean into the fact that we already have slowed down a little bit, and just really lean into taking in, as Susan said earlier, some of the contemplative practices and some of the other aspects of it. Even thinking about what you were talking about with Silent Night, it's like, why would there need to be words at all? We know them. So just taking that moment to just be in silence as perhaps a church musician plays soft, and just to really contemplate on what that moment is for us, and that moment of the incarnation of Christ being present truly with us.
One of the ideas that we had among the children's ministers group was going back to Christmas Eve, and then you could go into Epiphany, but give part of the Christmas story to each family and let them share a picture video of that part of the story, and then have someone pull all that together. And that kind of becomes your children's nativity, but it becomes a family event where the families are helping to do that as well. And you could then give parts of the Epiphany story and have that video shared at worship on Epiphany Sunday.
That's a really wonderful idea. Now, that would take a certain level of technological skill and time that not everyone has, but some people can do stuff like that. And could you scale that back some way? Well, I mean, this is a piece, if you are able to create it as a video that you could use in the sanctuary if you had screens as part of your worship service, because I really do think replacing some of those in-person things that we would normally do with something pre-recorded that does double duty, both online and in person, is the way to go, because it keeps people safe. So that would work really well for something, both of those.
We had scaled that back too, to just take a photo, and that somebody composites the photo, and even if you just put it on your Facebook page,
and then Narrate it.
or use the photo in worship in some form or fashion.
So very simple.
The story is shared, read, told.
Okay. Well, I think that's pretty much all I have for you today. We're at the end of time. And I'm, like I said, I wish that I had more answers than questions, but hopefully this has gotten us all at least thinking. And again, I want to encourage you all to be people who are able to say no to some things this year in order to not just preserve your own self and your own energy, but also to help the church live into and grow into this opportunity. I mean, one of the things that's come out of this for me is lots more sort of educating people on where these traditions came from, how they got translated into a church setting, and why it's okay to take them home. You know, maybe it's even more appropriate to take them back home.
Hey, Dawn, real quick question.
Yes.
And I'll just show my ignorance. Well, ignorance means that you don't know something. So do the candles have to be purple and pink? Like, I don't know how easy that is to find. Okay. I was like, how does that have to be etched? It has to be that. Okay.
Perfect. Nothing attached to that tradition predates maybe the 40s as part of worship. The Advent candle wreath started as a home devotional practice in Germany. It wasn't attached to any particular colored candles. All that stuff got translated again by like a desire for church worship production houses, like that make candles and bulletins and that sort of thing, to sell products. And it got moved into the sanctuary. It was, if you look up the history of the Advent tradition, candle tradition, the Advent wreath tradition, you can find that on Wikipedia, and it'll show you where that came from. And you know, I would encourage you to write something meaningful that's connected to what you're doing in your series as you go through Advent for people to use at home. So yeah. Seems like a really simple craft project that kids could do. And then they would be invested in wanting to use it on Sundays.
Those, I did them in worship last year with the kids with birthday candles and green clay, and the top, a jewelry box lid, you know, the square jewelry box lids. The square jewelry box lid, a thing of clay, and 4 birthday candles. And each kid had their own, and they loved it, and they lit them at home. So they told me about it. So, you know, it can be that cheap and that simple, or it can be nicer depending on what people want.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's been great listening to your ideas. You've given me lots of ideas, and I hope I gave you some things to think about. And I pray God's blessing upon each of you as you walk through this great time and opportunity with your congregations.
Thank you, Dawn. Very helpful.
Don, thank you so much. We appreciate you leading and thinking, getting us to think about where we are, and we've all gathered some ideas. Appreciate each one of you and all the wonderful thoughts and ideas you've passed along. I've come away with several neat ideas. So thank you.
Thank you.